Peter, I just want to get one final thought from you. Are there words that are used to describe men that offend you?
Not particularly, and if there are some I don't like, I certainly wouldn't want them banned. But it always goes back to that old adage: sticks and stones may break my bones, but there will always be something to offend a feminist.
Peter Lloyd.
No, that's just obnoxious.
Peter
Sorry,
Lloyd,
you have to give me a chance to respond to that. That is ridiculous. No, hang on, I won't do your show again if you don't let me respond to that.
Go on, Kate, have a word.
Come on, that's ridiculous. I mean,
you know what? I watch that at least once a month. It just puts a smile on my face, and it's a reminder that the battle of the sexes has been going on forever. As, someone in a different, less politically correct generation would say, women, you can't live with them, you can't live without them. It's been a challenge for every young man and young woman to figure things out. In the past, they were called hopeless romantics, or in the 80s or 90s, maybe emo, short for emotional. But now, young men and women who are having trouble finding a mate, they're called incels, involuntary celibates. All right, fair enough. But now it seems that political activists are trying to turn that into some sort of ideology, some sort of terror group. And in fact, here in the city of Toronto, there has been terror charges laid against a 17-year-old man for murder in a, quote, erotic massage parlor. He killed a 24-year-old woman, allegedly. Is that a crime of passion, a hopeless person wrestling with his own demons? Or is it a terrorist act? Well, joining us now is the man you saw in that clip. Peter Lloyd is his name. He's an author and journalist in the UK, and he joins us now via Skype. Peter, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Great, thanks for finally having me. This is my debut on Rebel, so it's great to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I saw you were published in RT. You had a great column on this subject, and the very fact that you were in RT, I want to remark on that because your point of view is considered, I mean, I would call you a men's rights activist might be too much. I'll let you describe yourself. But your point of view is generally pushed out of mainstream media in the West. It doesn't surprise me that you have to go to a foreign outlet like RT to say the things you say.
Right. I mean, that is a telling sign of the state of journalism. I've worked for a number of newspapers and magazines in my time. I'm nearly 40 now, and I've reached the point where I just no longer want to try and fight to get column inches in a paper where my view isn't going to be kind of respected or treated with any kind of reverence. So now I've gone to one of the outlets that will give me the freedom to say what I believe is true and to let the audience decide for themselves. That's one of the great things about RT, which allows people to do that.
It's so unusual that we have to go to foreign press to have the freedom to say things in our own countries. Well, Peter, let me know what you think about this Toronto case. You're in the UK, but it looks like you've done a lot of research into it. I mean, being a teenager is a phase, it's hormones, it's figuring things out, it's how do I relate to women, or am I gay, or what's going on? There's a lot of questions. To turn that into some sort of terrorist ideology seems a bit of a stretch to me.
Yeah, and me too. I'm totally with you on that. I mean, my first reaction when I heard of this case, if I'm honest, was to cringe. I thought, my God, just when you think Canada can't get any more woke, it surprises you. I mean, obviously, look, this crime was terrible. It was a brutal homicide. It was made worse by the fact that this woman was young, she was an innocent victim, and she was also the mother to a young child. So it's terrible on all fronts. Nobody would disagree with that. But it's clearly not terrorism. I mean, I've witnessed terrorism firsthand. I was 12 when the IRA detonated bombs in my local town centre. I was on the London Underground when 7/7 happened. And about 2 years ago, my niece was at the Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, where an Islamic extremist detonated a bomb and killed more than 20 youngsters. So I know to some degree what terrorism looked like and what it resembles. And this was not it. It wasn't nowhere near on the same scale 9/11, as the Bataclan massacre, or any of those other atrocities which are performed crucially with a political motive. As you said earlier, what happened in this case is clearly either some kind of derangement or mental illness crossed with a crime of passion. I think it's really important that we maintain the integrity of the word terrorism, because the West is going to experience a lot more of it over the next few decades, and we need to be able to have a term that accurately describes it and does those events justice.
Yeah. You know, my theory for why they're trying to rebrand a young emotional man's violence, sexual frustration, as right-wing. They're trying to brand it as terrorism so they can have another cudgel to go after right-wingers. I don't see anything right-wing or left-wing about, in this case, a 17-year-old guy, crime of passion, confusion. Like, I don't know if he was right-wing or left-wing. I think people of all political stripes and no political stripes have curiosity and frustration and hope and sorrow and are figuring things out. I think it's sort of a trick to try and say we're going to brand all young, emotionally brooding men as right-wing to demonize all right-wingers. That's my theory.
I actually think I think it's broader than just right-wing men. It's just young men in general, specifically young white straight men. I think that is really their target group. I mean, if this charge of terrorism is successful in Canada, it will be the first time that that code of criminal conduct has been used against someone who wasn't an Islamic extremist. So I think it's two-pronged. I think really they want to try and find a new category to criminalize straight, white, young men. And I also think they want to try and make terrorism look less connected to Islam than it actually is. I mean, if we face reality, all of the major events that have been terror-related have all been connected to Islam.
You know, that's a very good point. You're right. It's not even right-wing, left-wing. It's just men. And as you say, I mean, I don't think we know the identity of this 17-year-old because his identity is shielded, although there was another case of an Incel attack in Toronto. It looked like a Muslim man of age 30. But I think you're right. I think they're trying to de-Islamify the crime of terrorism, and they're trying to take a swipe at all men, at masculinity itself. I think they're trying to turn masculinity into a political ideology and say if you're too masculine, your toxic masculinity is a form of extremism. I think that's where they're going here.
That's exactly what it is. And even I view it as a form of kind of almost chemical castration. It's like a social castration in a way. It's saying, well, you're only allowed to be so masculine and you're only allowed to have certain views about feminism and you're only allowed to have certain views about certain women in your life. And if you violate those boundaries, then we're going to define you as a terrorist. Meanwhile, women can say whatever they like about men. Women can attack their boyfriends and their husbands, and they can say whatever they like on social media or in person. And they are beyond reproach. Nothing happens to them. So that alone is proof that this is clearly driven by some gender agenda, as I would say.
Now, I follow you because I think you're a very entertaining and articulate speaker. I get a kick out of your video appearances, and I just...
Ezra, I have a mouth like a sailor sometimes.
Well, that's half the reason I like you. No, I'm kidding around. So when I saw that you were talking about something Canadian, I thought, well, we got to get Peter Lloyd on. Let me ask you, you're in the UK, which is a very politically correct place. I mean, in some ways, it's worse than Canada. Have you ever seen this kind of thing? I think you hinted at it before that this is new. Have you seen this in the UK or in other jurisdictions? Maybe in Holland, maybe in France, maybe in the European Union. Is this new? Like, is Canada on the leading edge of this wokeness, or is this coming from somewhere else?
I think it's maybe slightly ahead. I mean, you've got Trudeau, so that's a pretty powerful woke force you've got there. Yeah. But I know that here in Britain, there have been politicians who've been trying to make misogyny a hate crime, which is kind of a very similar category to what we're talking about, what's happening in Canada. They're literally trying to make a dislike of feminism a criminal offence, which is punishable by a custodial sentence. I mean, it's Orwellian. You just wouldn't believe that this was a potential reality. And what really scares me is that in my lifetime, I fully expect that it will be. Women and feminists will be allowed to say whatever they want about men. They will have complete free speech. But men will not have free speech, and they will have their actions ruled by legislation which essentially castrates them. It will curtail their opinions and their thought. It's like the thought police that Orwell wrote about. It really is. We are approaching that situation.
Let me ask you one more thing, because one thing I would say, you mentioned Islam, and I don't think that wokeness has affected Muslims, at least not en masse, at least not those who identify as Muslim, certainly not the ones that I have come into contact with in the UK or Canada. It's typically a post-modern, Western, post-liberal, like it just feels like it's the residue of a decaying Western liberal empire. Is there something about the fact that Muslim men are confident, maybe physical, certainly not emasculated, and the Western man is not allowed to show any manly traits? How do those, I mean, obviously we don't want certain manly traits. We want violence to be channeled and governed and used only properly. I mean, there are crimes that have an aggressive masculine hue to them.
Right.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Because this, I think you're right that this is targeting meek male feminists who uptalk and who are woke and who take women's studies degrees. And I think there's something there. I don't know quite what it is. Have you done any thinking on that?
I mean, it's hard to analyze and to kind of quantify those theories, but I think you're definitely onto something. Men who exist within the religion of Islam and the community of fellow Muslims, that society still respects men and masculinity, whether that be as fathers or as sons or as, you know, people in the workforce or in the mosques or the faith. Men are still respected, and they aren't subjected to the same level of kind of misandry and man-hating that I think a lot of Western men are, Christian men, Jewish men. And I think that is the crucial difference, is because really the venom that we see in the press from a lot of like feminist columnists and, you know, celebrities, most of their venom is directed at straight white men, which is what I was saying before, and that they are now the one demographic that it's okay to kind of abuse. And this is what I was going to say as well, is that a lot of people are talking about the existence of these so-called incels, but really maybe we should be asking, why do these people exist in the first place? I mean, it's clearly some kind of mental derangement, but what is driving people, young men, to that level of despair, where they are feeling that level of hatred to women, and they're acting out on it to the point where they're killing somebody, they're committing homicide. Maybe we should be asking ourselves the question culturally: what is leading men down that path? What is forcing them to feel so disenfranchised and so resentful of women that they would do those things? I mean, I would suggest perhaps it's the level of man-hating that's in media and society. Maybe that has got a role to play.
You know, that's a great question. If there was another terrorism, if there was another ideology that was manifesting itself in terrorist violence, we would say, what are the root causes? Where has society done wrong? Who pushed them away? Could we have been more welcoming? Could we have a day of the year, a week of the year to celebrate their masculinity? You know, to make there would have been some way to include them in the vibrant rainbow of society. But I think even the word incel is a disparaging way of saying a guy who's having trouble, with the opposite sex. It's loaded in a negative way from the outset. Last word to you, Peter. It's been great to catch up with you. Do you think we're going to see more of this? Do you think we'll see more personal crimes of passion rebranded as incel terrorism?
Yeah, I do. Unfortunately, I think so. I think, this is a war that's being waged by woke politicians on the left. And unfortunately, masculinity and men are the quarry. They are in the crosshairs of their gun. And unfortunately, I just think we're just going to see more and more of it. It could be scaled back. Maybe we could try and avoid it, and we could limit these kind of instances. But I think we'd have to have a bit of a cultural revolution where we start treating men and boys with a little bit more common decency and not humiliating them and degrading them at every given opportunity.
All right, well said. Well, Peter Lloyd, what a pleasure to catch up with you. Great to see you. We hope to have you back on again.
Yeah, I'll buy you a pint next time you're in London, Ezra.
Hey, that sounds great. Hopefully that'll be soon. Well, there you have it. Peter Lloyd, an author and journalist, and he goes by the nickname the Suffrage Gentleman, which I get a kick out of, and you should follow him on Twitter on the handle on your screen. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.